Distinguished delegates, Agenda Item 5 of the 10th Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development will commence shortly. May I please ask all to take their seats? Distinguished delegates, Agenda Item 5 of the 10th Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development will commence shortly. May I please ask all to take their seats?
Excellency, distinguished delegate, a very good afternoon. Welcome back to plenary session of the 10th Asia Pacific Forum for Sustainable Development. The meeting is called to order. I would like to express my sincere appreciation for your trust bestowed in me to serve as one of the vice chair of this meeting. During this session, we proceed with the agenda item 5, review of regional progress and opportunity for achieving the SDG. Under this agenda, there are 3 items to discuss. As indicated in the program, we will proceed with each of them one by one. After finishing each item, we will open the floor for country and stakeholder statement. Let me start with the item on implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development at the sub-regional level. The document prominent to this session is implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development at the sub-regional level, ESCAP/RFSD/2023/5. For this session, we are very honored to get the support from Mrs. Mikiko Tanaka, head of the sub-regional office for South and Southwest Asia, ESCAP, who will moderate this discussion. May I invite Mrs. Tanaka to come to the restroom and moderate the discussion, please.
Thank you, His Excellency Mr. Pagnatun Teng. Our session will begin with an introduction video on the multi-stakeholder sub-regional forums held last year. May I now ask the conference room officers to play the short video from the sub-regional SDG forums.
The ESCAP's program connects the Commission's presence at the sub-regional level to better target and effectively deliver the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. There are 5 sub-regional offices covering the Pacific, East and Northeast Asia, South and Southwest Asia, North and Central Asia, and Southeast Asia. Each office annually holds a multi-stakeholder forum on the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. The forums provide an inclusive and vibrant platform for multi-stakeholder groups to share sub-regional perspectives, discuss collaborative measures, and exchange good practices to achieve the 2030 Agenda. These forums have been playing a catalytic role in uniting voices for regional and global discussions on SDGs through the Asia-Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development in Bangkok and at the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development in New York.
I look forward to the discussion today to identifying the entry points to accelerate SDG progress, especially those under review. Please count on UN ESCAP as your trusted partner in achieving the SDGs.
In 2022, the forums focused on the progress and challenges of Goal 6, Clean Water and Sanitation, Goal 7, Affordable and Clean Energy, Goal 9, Industry, Innovation and Infrastructure, Goal 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, and Goal 17, Partnership for the Goals, with the overall theme of accelerating the recovery from COVID-19 while advancing the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development.
All the stakeholders are here, basically not only to talk about the problem, the challenges, but more importantly, to share the experience, lessons learned, especially with regard to the solutions.
Our session today will feature the outcomes from the 5 sub-regional SDG forums, and we'll discuss common challenges, priority actions, and aspirations as we move forward towards the 2023 SDG Summit. Welcome to the sub-regional session of the APFSD.
Thank you for playing the video. Next, it is a pleasure to invite Mr. Ruhimat Surasukusuma, Head Sub-Regional Office for Southeast Asia of ESCAP, to give a presentation on the outcomes of the sub-regional forums. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mikiko. Excellencies, distinguished guests, a very good afternoon. On behalf of the 5 sub-regional offices of ESCAP, allow me a few minutes to present the highlights of the sub-regional SDG forums that were held across Asia Pacific in 2022. Let me first begin with an overview of the SDG progress in the Asia Pacific, followed by the progress in each of the 5 sub-regions before highlighting the challenges faced by countries with respect to the 5 priority SDGs of 2022. And these were discussed during the sub-regional multi-stakeholder forums. The overview would provide the context of countries' efforts in achieving the 2030 Agenda. According to ESCAP's annual Asia-Pacific SDG Progress Report and our SDG Data Gateway, the region is not on track to achieve any of the 17 SDGs, with substantial improvement still required on most goals. Overall, there has been good progress in several of the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically SDG 7, SDG 9, but nevertheless, the region has regressed when it comes to the environment-related goals, such as Goal 13, which is climate action. Progress in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda across Asia-Pacific subregions is diverse and uneven, owing to the unique challenges faced and the resources opportunities available in each. Besides climate action, targeted assistance is needed for countries in SDGs 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, Goal 12, Responsible Consumption and Production, and 14, Life Below Water. From the overview, difficulties encountered by countries in the region that have affected progress of the SDGs include the compounding effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is most obviously, adverse impacts of climate change and natural disasters, as we are fully aware that Asia-Pacific is the world's most disaster-prone region, especially in 2022, where floods were at its deadliest, accounting 74% of the disaster events in the region and 88% of the total deaths globally. Volatile energy prices, inflation, reduction of remittance incomes, and disruptions of shipping and transport due to the geopolitical crisis and the widening financing gaps and shrinking fiscal space. What should be pointed out is that the pandemic and food, finance, and energy crisis are not the prime reason for this lack of progress, but they have certainly slowed progress. Amidst increasing risks and uncertainty, several opportunities and priority actions for accelerating progress were identified during last year's multi-stakeholder forums, on the implementation of the SDGs. Permit me to go through each of the SDGs and enumerate them. For clean water sanitation, priorities across the subregions include strengthening institutional frameworks and the enabling environment for water and sanitation services with increased targeted investments to reach the most disadvantaged in rural communities is required. Collective action on accelerators of progress in water management and sanitation, including governance, financing, and capacity development. Also addressing inadequacies in water resources management and infrastructure, and promoting greater coherence of policies, initiatives among water and water usage energies. For affordable and clean energy, there should be further exploration of sustainable energy transition opportunities, such as financing and technology to raise the scale of investment. There should also be work on the commitments to increase the share of renewables in the total energy mix through improved regional connections. It is important to continue the investments in energy, particularly in sustainable energy projects. This is critically important to ensure future energy security and prevent economically destabilizing price spikes. Investments in RE has proved to be one that makes the most economic sense while stopping us from catastrophic global warming. For industry, innovation, and infrastructure, there should be increase in economic resilience, diversification of economic structure, and the promotion of regional cooperation. There are opportunities for partnerships, capacity building, and knowledge transfer to address urban-rural infrastructure disparities toward inclusive, resilient, and sustainable infrastructure that should be taken. Finally, the obvious question is how do we finance these transitions, especially when recent crises have left governments with constrained fiscal space, rising borrowing costs, and looming debt burdens. There is reason for optimism as innovative financial instruments are emerging fast. The fast-growing number of green, social, and sustainable bonds in Asia-Pacific hold great potential for realigning to finance sustainability. For sustainable cities and communities, the transformative role of cities in building longer-term resilience, integrated planning and management, city-to-city cooperation plays an essential part in localizing SDGs and opens new opportunities for regional governments. Sustainable urbanization should be addressed through infrastructure development, particularly focusing on affordable housing and inclusive, clean, and safe public transport systems. Lastly, there should be provisions of adequate and sustainable urban infrastructure to meet the increasing pace of urbanization. Last but not least, for partnership and enabling mechanisms, we should encourage engagement more frequently on a range of policies and legislation that impact people, especially the vulnerable groups. There should be increased engagement and collaboration between the private sector, academia, civic groups, and other stakeholders are essential to design, finance, and manage projects, as well as to disseminate knowledge and share best practices. Partnerships for sustainable and equitable development should form part of efforts to advance regional economic cooperation and integration through enhanced trade in goods and services and cross-border investment flows. And finally, cooperation with the sub-region should also be pursued to advance common development objectives. Progress towards the SDGs has slowed as the COVID pandemic and climate change have certainly exacerbated development challenges. As the region is both a victim and culprit of climate change, reversing the negative trend on climate action should be a top priority. Moreover, there is an urgent need for regional collaboration and partnerships to ensure that no one and no country in any of these subregions will be left behind. This includes technical assistance, capacity building, and sharing of best practices. Collective actions at the subregion level could also be utilized as building blocks to engender cooperation across subregions for a broader region-wide approach in addressing development challenges. Further, there should also be harmonization of collaboration actions among the different sectors and stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Surakusuma. Next, we will have representatives from the sub-regional organizations who will share their perspectives on climate action and building resilience against catastrophic risks. In relation to the progress and implementation of SDG 6, clean water and sanitation, 7, affordable and clean energy, 9, industry, innovation and infrastructure, 11, sustainable cities and communities, and 17, partnerships for the goals. First, I would like to ask Ms. Rianti Jalante from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN Secretariat. Can you share what are some of the initiatives by ASEAN that build resilience against future risks?
Thank you very much. Can I confirm if I can be heard well?
Ms. Jalante, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you and see you well, and I'm speaking now. Can you confirm if you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. So can you share what are some of the initiatives by ASEAN that build resilience against future risks?
Thank you very much, moderator. So esteemed panelists, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. First and foremost, I would like to express our sincere appreciation to ESCAP for organizing the 10th Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development. It's my utmost pleasure to represent ASEAN Secretariat to share a review on our regional progress on implementation of the 2020 Agenda and opportunities to achieve Sustainable Development Goals. So allow me to share best practices based on ASEAN experience in building resilience to disasters in the region, particularly highlighting our supports to implement SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. So ladies and gentlemen, Southeast Asia is one of the most disaster-prone regions in the world. So the member states have dealt with past onset disasters, but recently our region faced new challenges on the ever-changing landscape of disaster risk that is becoming more complex. Climate change is also projected to increase disaster frequency and intensity in the region. So therefore, it's essential for ASEAN to continue enhancing our regional cooperation for coordination, technical assistance, resource mobilization in all aspects of disaster management. We are glad to share with you that ASEAN has adopted the ASEAN Agreement on Disaster Management and Emergency Response for ATMER in 2009 to ensure coherent strategies in dealing with disaster and build community resilience. The ASEAN Community on Disaster Management in charge of the implementation of ATMER priority programs. In responding to growing threat of climate change and evolving risk landscape, we have launched ASEAN Framework on Anticipatory Action in Disaster Management. So this framework provides guidance in defining and contextualizing anticipatory action at regional level to ensure that early warning system translated into effective anticipatory action to reduce impacts of disasters in the region. So in order to guide our work, we formulate ATMER work program every 5 years. Which is aligned with SDGs, particularly SDG 1, 11, 13, and 17. So the current AWP covers 5 priority programs, and let me highlight some of our key flagship initiatives to implement this work program. On risk assessment and monitoring, we have disaster monitoring and response system by AHA Center. For resilience, we have a program on resilient cities to provide practical measures for local government and relevant institutions in reducing local risks and mainstream DRR in urban planning and development. ASEAN and ESCAP has a project on implementation of ASEAN Declaration on strengthening adaptation to drought to strengthen regional cooperation in provision of data, drought risk management, and multi-stakeholder cooperation. We are conducting transboundary risk assessment and scenario planning for tropical cyclones and drought. On preparedness and response, we have one ASEAN One Response Declaration, which guides ASEAN disaster management coordination and response, and by which AHA Center serve as the operational engines. On top of that, we have key programs on ASEAN Emergency Response and Assessment Team, on also disaster emergency logistics system for ASEAN or DELSA. So finally, to strengthen our vision to be the global leaders in disaster management, ASEAN will conduct our first ASEAN Disaster Regional Forum, which will provide avenue for ASEAN and non-ASEAN stakeholders to discuss topics related to disaster resilience in the region. Thank you very much, moderator.
Thank you, Ms. Jalante. For the next intervention, I would like to ask Ms. Gohar Barsegyan from the Eurasian Economic Commission, EEC. What are the collective actions being taken in the territory of the Eurasian Economic Union that address climate action?
Thank you very much, Ms. Tanaka, Excellencies, dear participants. First of all, let me, on behalf of the Eurasian Economic Commission, the supranational body of the Eurasian Economic Union, which unites 5 countries, Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Russia, to thank you for the invitation and to welcome all of you. The Eurasian Economic Union is actively implementing agreed approaches to the carbon regulation within the framework of its international cooperation and harmonization of the approaches of the Eurasian Economic Union member states in the context of implementing climate action. In 2021, the heads of the Eurasian Economic Union member states together adopted a statement on economic cooperation within the framework of the climate action, which set the vector for the formation of coordinated approaches in this area within the framework of our integration association. In particular, the heads of our states in the statement put a special emphasis on the convergence of approaches to monitoring and verification of emissions and removals of greenhouse gases, which will stimulate the use of green finance tools to supply climate project, and declare their intention to develop economic cooperation between the Eurasian Economic Union member states within the framework of climate action, as well as for achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement and UN Sustainable Development Goals. In the same year, a high-level working group was established to develop proposals for the harmonization of the positions of the Eurasian Economic Union member states within the framework of the climate agenda. The mentioned working group has prepared a roadmap for cooperation between the Eurasian Economic member states, which was recently approved by the prime ministers of our countries. The roadmap is focusing in the following main areas: analysis of national legislative regulation in the climate action, climate sphere, and preparation of proposals for the development of common approaches in this area. Development of proposals for the formation of joint market and non-market mechanisms for carbon regulation to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. Determination of measures to simulate low-emission transformation in the industries such as transport, energy, chemical industry, construction, agriculture, and etc. And the formation of the Bank of Climate Technologies and Digital Initiatives. I would like to inform that the bank has already been formed and is already functioning. The main purpose is to present technologies developed in the Union States, both for the usage within the Eurasian Economic Union and for providing alternative options to foreign partners investing in green projects. All interested persons and organizations can refer to the catalog of technologies, which is available on our official website. And finally, the roadmap is planned to contribute to the coordination in the field of international trade relations on issues of climate agenda and other interaction in order to promote the interests of the Eurasian Economic member countries. And in conclusion, I would like to add that the EIU legislation and the agreement of the Eurasian Economic Union yet does not cover these issues, and this is a new and very important sphere for us. And the mentioned measures that have been taken by the heads of our states, by the prime ministers, shows the importance of this new direction for our international organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Barsagin. Next, I would like to ask Mr. Andrei Smorodin from the Greater Tumen Initiative Secretariat, the GTI. What engagements, activities, and initiatives are being facilitated by GTI through its intergovernmental platform with its member states, China, Mongolia, Republic of Korea, Russian Federation, to promote resilient and sustainable connectivity?
Well, thank you, moderator. Well, distinguished panelists and participants, of course, it's a great honor for me to participate in this session of the 10th Asia-Pacific Forum for Sustainable Development and share GTI's experience and initiatives. Well, members of the GTI Consultative Commission, I would like to mention that Consultative Commission is a governing body of GTI. During their meeting in December last, reiterated the importance of connectivity, including in the areas of trade, transport, and energy, is one of the key elements of the post-pandemic recovery, economic recovery in the Northeast Asia region. Furthermore, they reached consensus on working jointly to revitalize global and regional supply chains, adopt inclusive economic and trade policies, consolidate infrastructure connectivity, and enhance industrial and agricultural cooperation, increase energy efficiency with the view of converging Northeast Asia regional development strategies of member states. Speaking about promotion of resilient and sustainable connectivity, I would like to highlight our successful experience of working closely with ESCAP in this direction. We have already a good record of organizing joint events which provided opportunities for our member countries to share their experience and learn best practices in promoting resilient and sustainable connectivity. With ESCAP ENA office, we have held several activities with the overarching theme of connectivity in energy, transport, and trade sectors. Well, we had a seminar on energy cooperation Northeast Asia, back-to-back with the Energy Board meeting in August last year. We had a seminar on transport issues in Northeast Asia in November last year, called Digitalization of Transport Towards Resilient, Seamless, and Sustainable Connectivity. We also had a 10th International Seminar on Trade Facilitation in Northeast Asia in February this year. And in addition to the above-mentioned regular events, well, in October last year, we had the first annual forum on connectivity, which was organized in cooperation with the UN ESCAP. Well, the forum contributed to sharing member states' knowledge and experience in maintaining resilient supply chains and preserving seamless cross-border trade and transport connectivity, especially focusing on food security challenges and promoting agricultural development. GTI Secretariat also provided support to ESCAP projects by facilitating communication with our stakeholders in energy sector and local cooperation committee members in the process of implementation of the following projects. First, capacity building needs assessment for effective power interconnection cooperation in Northeast Asia, and sub-regional survey study on the impact of transport and trade facilitation measures. We hope the further progress in building partnership and finding new paths of cooperation and more extensive and specific joint achievements, and look forward to furthering coordination with ESCAP and other regional organizations on this track. On bilateral levels, we have witnessed substantial progress in development of transport infrastructure connectivity in between our member countries. For example, last year, 2 cross-border bridges were opened to traffic between China and Russia, and discussions are also being held in trilateral format regarding creation of an economic corridor among China, Russia, and Mongolia. And we hope that more multilateral connectivity projects could be discussed and initiated by our members, which could contribute to regional connectivity in energy, transport, and trade in Northeast Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Smorodin. Next, I would like to ask all our panelists, what initiatives do you think can be taken forward across the subregions or areas of collaboration to support climate action or resilience to risks that ESCAP can support. So I would like to go back to Ms. Jalante from the ASEAN Secretariat. Is she online?
Thank you very much. So esteemed participants, ladies and gentlemen, allow us to give our response to the second question. This is where SDG 17 that stresses global partnerships becomes very important. The importance of partnership is also stipulated in the ASEAN Vision 2025 on disaster management. We value partnership as it would leverage our capacity in addressing issues related to disasters in the region. ASEAN Joint Statement on Strengthening Resilience to Disasters for the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction also highlight the importance of forging stronger partnership and cooperation with dialogue partners, development partners, partnership group, and think tanks and academia, UN agency, including those vulnerable groups. Strong partnership are essential to enhance disaster resilience in the region. We have, following the endorsement of the ASEAN ASEAN Regional Framework on Anticipatory Action, we would like to also highlight initiatives that can be taken forward across the sub-regions to strengthen early warning system. This is outlined in Priority 1 of our ARTMER Work Program 2025, particularly those that highlight end-to-end people-centered early warning system, by which disaster knowledge, warning dissemination and communication, detection, monitoring, analysis, as well as preparedness and response capacities needs to be strengthened. On this occasion, we also highlight the needs for cooperation, sub-regional cooperation on cross-boundaries disasters, which is in the ASEAN region. They are mostly related to floods, drought, and typhoon. On this occasion, we would particularly appreciate continued support and cooperation provided by ESCAP in strengthening disaster management in the region through our joint study on Ready for Dry Years, building resilience to drought in Southeast Asia. We have developed the ASEAN Regional Plan of Action and on adaptation to drought, and this is where continued supports and cooperation between ASEAN and ESCAP can be implemented. Finally, we would like to inform the participants that ASEAN will organize ASEAN Disaster Management Week in August 2023. ADMW will consist of several events, including ASEAN Interregional Dialogues on Disaster Resilience and our first ASEAN Disaster Resilience Platform, which provide a venue for ASEAN and non-ASEAN stakeholders to discuss topics related to disasters in the region. We would very much appreciate ESCAP participation and, of course, our invitation to other regional, sub-regional groups present in this meeting. Thank you very much, moderator.
Thank you, Ms. Jalante. Next, I would like to invite Ms. Barsegian from EEC to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tanaka. First of all, I would like to say that the climate action agenda issues are widely discussed also with our international partners because, as you may know, the Eurasian Economic Union has a wide range of international cooperation. And of course, we appreciate ESCAP efforts to include us also in this discussion. And as particularly climate agenda issues are included in our agenda, for example, with the Socialist Republic of Vietnam and the United Arab Emirates, with whom we have signed memorandum of understanding and we are cooperating. These issues are included in the roadmap in cooperation with the Republic of Uzbekistan, with the Republic of Serbia. Why I am concentrating on this? I want to show that the climate agenda issues are part also of our international agenda. As I mentioned in my previous speech, however, at the moment, the Eurasian Economic Union legislation does not provide the Commission with the competence to implement possible mechanisms aimed at the implementation, the Framework Convention on Climate Change and the Paris Agreement. But I would like to stress that the EIU legislation is flexible and it gives us an opportunity in parallel to include build new issues and to make changes in EU legislation. And at this moment, also there is a lack of competencies for harmonizing approaches in the field of carbon regulation of the EU member states, as well as for the further implementation of existing projects. So we would highly appreciate the exchange of experience in this sphere with UN ESCAP, and I would like to use this floor to suggest the ESCAP to have maybe a joint seminar or event on climate agenda issues with the Eurasian Economic Commission, because this will be very fruitful both for us and for ESCAP to share the experience in the Eurasian region and to hear what is being done by the member states of the Eurasian Economic Union. So we at the Eurasian Economic Commission believe that a joint climate agenda should be one of the unifying projects in such a diverse region as Eurasia. The world is changing very rapidly, and we should move together in order to get some answers to new questions. And today, economic cooperation needs to be developed as a part of the climate agenda, partly in an effort to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Barseghian. Next, I would like to ask Mr. Smorodin from GTI to provide his views.
Thank you, moderator. Well, the issue of initiatives which should be taken to build a resilience to future risks, of course, it's a very timely and important issue. Well, but at the same time, it's not an easy task to realize, since future risks might contain too many uncertainties which could not be predicted from today. Well, nevertheless, there is a common understanding among GTI members that building a more interconnected, resilient, stable, and strong supply chains, incorporating sustainable finance practices into national policies, as well as maintaining open, free, fair, inclusive, non-discriminatory, transparent, and predictable trade and investment environment in the region are very essential in the context of current challenges and within the context of meeting the future challenges. So these initiatives are important in building resilience to future risks. We hope that our stakeholders would continue to adopt resilient policy measures and put efforts in converging their initiatives. And I believe that such events as we are having today could contribute to such efforts. So, well, the GTI Secretariat in its turn stands ready to provide necessary coordination and facilitation support to our member countries' initiatives in this field. And with this, I will prefer to stop, not to elaborate on issues which are quite important, but too uncertain. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smorodin. I would now like to invite Mr. Henry Cocker from the Pacific Islands Forum Secretariat, PIFS, to provide his intervention.
Thank you, moderator. Excellencies, Maloelele, Bula. Greetings from the Pacific. On the question, what are the collective actions being taken in our sub-region to accelerate climate action? I'm mindful of the words collective action. I'm mindful that there are a number of voices and actions in the Pacific. We have members, we have Pacific regional organizations, and we have our civil society who are present here at the APFSD. My thoughts and simple answer to the question is that our most powerful collective action on climate from the Pacific is our unity in calling for a reduction in global warming to the 1.5 degrees Celsius level. Our SDG reports, statements, and 2050 strategy collectively call for world leaders to urgently commit to decisive climate actions that limits global warming. I illustrate this point using the specific 2022 quadrennial report on sustainable development. On the forward, You have the Secretary General of the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat calling for limits in global warming. On the section in the report on youth, you have a picture of Pacific youth protesting at COP26 with a quote from a youth leader calling for the same thing, calling for limits in global warming. Our reports are a record of the single voice from the Pacific. When our future looks back at this period of time, they will refer to these reports as evidence that the Pacific was united in their call for limits to global warming. On a bit more detail on other forms of collective action, our reports and latest statements refer to Pacific leaders' declarations. To name a few, we have Pacific Leaders' Boyd Declaration that declared climate change as the single greatest existential threat facing our region. The same declaration called for action to address the security risks posed by climate change. More recently, we have a declaration on preserving maritime zones in the face of climate change, sea level rise. The implications of the Declaration on Maritime Boundaries is on the loss of economic and natural resources due to the impact of climate change. We have political climate champions to drive the Pacific's climate change positions from a political level. The champions focus based on the priority areas identified by the region within the climate change space. Example, loss and damage, oceans, climate finance, gender equality, social inclusion, and adaptation. There are many more collective actions that are available from our websites and reports. However, key takeaway on this question is we in the Pacific speak with one voice in urging all of you, to limit global warming. Moderator, on the initiatives that can be taken forward across the sub-regions or areas of collaboration to support climate action that ESCAP, UN ESCAP can support, the short answer is that UN ESCAP should amplify the actions of the Pacific. Amplify our collective voices in all platforms. Be part of the record books now. Be part of the collective voice calling, urging for our leaders' declaration to commit to limiting global warming to the 1.5 degrees Celsius. UN ESCAP can also support the Pacific by agreeing to redefine the maritime boundaries under UN clause, which will have direct implications for statehoods and a need to relook at the accepted definition of what constitutes as a state, given that most of these frameworks were developed in the absence of any consideration of climate change and climate impacts. UN ESCAP can also assist with other development dimensions through means of implementation, ranging from data to innovative financing mechanisms, actions that are useful to us in the Pacific. In addition, UN ESCAP can assist the Pacific with alignments to the Pacific 2050 strategy. And to our work on the implementation plan that will be endorsed by leaders in the Cook Islands later this year. Moderator, with your patience, we have a message recording from the Deputy Secretary General of the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat, Dr. Philemon Manoni, as my concluding remarks. Thank you, Moderator. Binakavakalevo.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, greetings to all of you from the Pacific. It is my great pleasure to address you today at this 10th Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development. Excellencies, from the Pacific, our SDG progress report today reflects the challenging environment that we operate in, because our SDG progress is not on track with an urgent need for sustained financial and technical support to improve statistical data and capacity. The current data suggests that the Pacific will only achieve approximately 20% of SDG targets by 2020. This is a sobering picture, but I think the more urgent question is, how do we as a region get back on track? Our current outlooks are filled with uncertainties attributed to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, the ongoing Ukraine-Russian war, and debt levels in the region, and of course, the impacts of global inflation on our economic outlook. These uncertainties are now on top of existing uncertainties and ongoing climate vulnerabilities associated with climate change, sea level rise, droughts, flooding, earthquake, and tsunamis. Excellencies, to emphasize, we in the Pacific are amongst the most vulnerable countries on the planet. From my own experience, cyclones damage buildings, infrastructure, and livelihoods. But what is sometimes not fully measured and reported after cyclones or disasters is the medium to long-term psychological and social impacts that often take a little bit longer time to be visible in the community. And of course, the general impacts on our economic development. Often, it is our most vulnerable that bear the brunt of such social adversity across our societies. We need to be mindful that our healing processes take time with ongoing support from adequate institutions and community social actions. We need to be more proactive in integrating the work we do on climate change and disaster risk management. And on this note, I want to extend heartfelt thoughts and prayers to the people of Vanuatu and New Zealand who were affected by the recent tropical cyclones, but we believe in the resilience of the Vanuatu and New Zealand people and stand in solidarity with them as they commence their journey to recovery. Resilience to adversity is an ongoing collective effort that requires progress on our SDG implementation and action. The annual focus on SDG clusters is just one of the many actions that we can take. Excellencies, our Pacific key messages for these SDGs can be summed up as follows. Number one, there is an urgent and sustained response required to address the Pacific region's water and sanitation issues. There is a need for strengthened partnerships for exploration of sustained energy transition, security, and resilience in the Pacific region. There is a need for ongoing effort to strengthen local governance and urban management. There is a need for the development of financial inclusion strategies and tailored technology-led services. There is a need for improvements to the availability of data and statistics and regional guidelines to support our work. And most importantly, there is a need for decisive global commitment on climate action that limits global warming to 1.5 degrees. Excellencies, on a longer time frame, SDG reports and voluntary national reviews show us our strengths, and it reminds us of where we are and why we need to work together as one community. We need to be efficient in how we rise to our challenges and move beyond change. we have taken this commitment further by endorsing and launching our 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent. Leaders on July 14, 2022, endorsed the strategy in Suva, Fiji. The 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent sets out the forum leaders' vision and various key thematic areas and strategic pathways for the future sustainable development of the Pacific region. Achieving this will require all partners to work together. We also look to you, our development partners, to support the implementation of 2050 strategy. The ultimate objective of all of these is ensuring that well-being of all peoples of the Pacific, leaving no one behind. And with these remarks, Excellencies, I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cocker, for your intervention and for the DSD video message. This ends the interventions from the sub-regional organizations. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Josiah Tokoni, Fiji Council of Social Services, to share his views. It's going to reverse the order. I'm going to ask Mr. Ale Muhammad from Chulalongkorn University and representing the Association of Pacific Rim Universities, APRU, to provide his intervention.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Good afternoon, respected audience. As Hala Lisani Shobha once said, youth revolution, the youth with solutions. As we tackle every issue with pride and passion, we do it without fear or favor. Gently wake up and smell the revolutionary coffee. Give us your ear, as we shall give you all the scoops as your daily bread. Forgive us, as we will not leave any stone unturned. Thank you, respected organizers and participants of the 10th APFSD, for allowing me to share my views. My name is Ale Muhammad. I belong to Pakistan, and I'm currently a student at Chulalongkorn University, Thailand. It is an honor for me to be here representing my fellow students from the Association of Pacific Rim Universities, or APRU, which supports members and partners to advance the Sustainable Development Goal in collaboration. The world at this point is undergoing major changes. We are experiencing changes not just in terms of global warming, but also in social and economical terms. The world that emerged as a result of recent COVID-19 pandemic is a world of chaos, where the majority of people were consumed by not only the physical illness, but also the mental health issues as a result of the financial meltdown due to COVID. The economy as of now is still in shambles, and we can even see the effect of it in terms of banking crisis across the globe. Youth are directly affected by these changes. Therefore, it is important for the youth, such as students like myself, to be able to take part in discussions and action in addressing the challenges, as we have to be responsible for our futures. I believe that with the right approach and proper integration of youth from across the globe, we will gradually emerge from these crises and make this world a better place. Whenever we talk about the revolution, we see that it has been the youth most of the time that played an important role in shaping the destiny. In order to bring revolution in today's world, it is the youth who can play an important role in promoting the SDGs. The youth today has more opportunities to acquire advanced knowledge and to access the technology to develop groundbreaking ideas and solutions. The use of social media is very popular among the youth, which makes us socially alert and aware of all the problems happening around the globe. We only need a platform where we can stand together and merge our ideas. Our ideas and thoughts must be brought to the mainstream in order to facilitate the growth of society in terms of skills as well as contribution to the SDGs. The countries located in Asia-Pacific region are standing on great resources, both in terms of natural and manpower. The youth in Asia-Pacific region are very dynamic as well. we can play a significant role in supporting SDGs by raising our voices and providing skills. To make us enablers of change, youth needs platforms and more support to be connected internationally. The APRU SDG Education for Global Citizenship program is one such platform where the students from diverse cultural and societal backgrounds are connected and encouraged to work in team, overcoming our differences so that we will learn to participate and contribute to the society actively. I was fortunate to be part of this program. The mentors of the program supported students to develop a social innovation project. It encouraged us to acquire the knowledge and leadership skills required to create a concrete impact in the society. This program brought together students across the Pacific Rim from different cultural and academic backgrounds and encouraged the flow of knowledge equally to devise common solutions for different issues that exist currently. All the students' teams who were part of this program presented their brilliant ideas. I was inspired by my fellow students as well. Importantly, this triggered us to come and continue to work together in the future. This has been a very exciting experience for me. In order to bring the youth together, universities can offer more programs such as this to motivate us to interact more. Universities can also provide resources to let us try out our actions. But I also learned the importance of other actors such as APRU, a university network which collaborates with UN agencies to empower future leaders to build a more sustainable world. Our learning experiences became more meaningful thanks to the support of United Nations resource person and other partners in the society. The APRU SDG Global Citizenship Program has done a great job in this regard, as several universities allowed their students to do such work, which resulted in flow of diversified ideas and knowledge. It can be further improved if more institutions take part and allow their young minds to inculcate with the people, learn from each other, and grow together. As the program supported us to develop a social innovation project, we can take advantage of startups empowered by the youth. The ideas brought up by the young people in such programs may still need refinement, but can be very valuable and innovative. Not only can these startups help recover the nations from the post-COVID struggles, but also provide a path to the futuristic models of world and unity. It can also ensure the fulfillment of Goal 17 of the SDGs, which is the partnership for the goals, empowered by the institutions, providing their mind and the youth by providing their skill and innovations. I believe that it is about time that the countries and institutions strongly support the free movement and participation of youth. The struggle of youth can bring the society together and provide a safe passage to a protected future. We need to stand together at these times of despair and put our personal interests aside to think, feel, and act how we can create a safe future for our younger generations. Together we stand, divide we fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Muhammad. So I give the floor now to Mr. Josiah Tokoni, the Fiji Council of Social Services.
Thank you, Moderator. Mr. Chairman, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, and all protocol observed. Bulawanak and One Pacific greetings. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are halfway towards the deadline of achieving the 2030 agenda. But it is more and more apparent that we are not only years but decades behind achieving these goals. The Asia-Pacific region is projected to achieve the SDG not only by 2065, notwithstanding the regressions at the current rate of progress. Besides, the projection is based on 57% of the available data, and the scale of unpredictability is humongous, with the unknown 47% that could push it well into 22nd century if concrete corrective measures are not applied in time. Estimate tells us that around 574 million people globally will be in extreme poverty, and a similar number of people will face hunger by 2030. Despite the model's limited scope of review, select goals of select countries, while leaving both goals and countries behind for those not under review. The goals under review this year also do not exude confidence. For instance, 1.6 billion people will lack safe drinking water and 2.8 billion people will be without sanitation and hygiene in 2030. Despite a slight increase in access to electricity, 100 million people might revert to solid fuels and 679 million will still be without access to electricity in 2030. Not even half of the countries were able to enact credible policies despite committing to end international financing of fossil fuel by 2022. While mobile connectivity has increased, half of the population has no equipment to access it, with digital divide impacting women more than men. Cities and urban poor vandalized by climate crisis. 99% of the urban population will continue to breathe polluted air, impacting human and environmental health. When we zoom into the Pacific, we will appreciate that these issues are more exacerbated by the structural vulnerabilities that we are exposed to. Most of the Pacific Island states, if not all, have narrow economic base which are consumption-driven. The Sixth Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, which was held in December last year, recognizes the urgent need for Pacific governments, together with civil society, private sector, and other stakeholders to address the multiple challenges of climate change, energy, health, food, and finance through regional cooperation and global solidarity. There is a need for policy coherence, regional collaborations and exchange of learnings, development of financing options, including debt management, tailored coordinated support that strengthen national capacity and strategies to mobilize resources. Our collective ambitions and commitment as Pacific Islanders have been captured in the 2050 strategy, and I must commend our leaders in doing so. However, it should not just stop there. It is rather unfortunate that most of this discussion looks good on paper, as it has been echoed far too many times in this room already this week. It requires political will for drivers and accelerators for these goals to be achieved. The realization of the goal needs everyone's collective effort. Allow me to share a few of our demands as Pacific civil societies. People-centered approach. People should be at the heart of the SDG implementation agenda, from the formulation of policy framework to the actual work on the ground. Meaningful engagement and participation of CSO actors. We need to be recognized in all our diversity as equitable development partners in the implementation of the 2030 agenda. Engagement with civil societies must include consultations from the initial stage and not at the tail end of the process, where it is nothing more than just ticking the box exercise. We need inclusive representation that allow better reporting of issues, especially for women, persons with disability, elderly, children, and youth. These are cross-cutting issues that need to be reflected and recognized. The civil society demand enabling civic spaces that encourage active participations of CSO and public. Dialogue spaces and platforms should allow robust participatory discussion, as this would be a platform to collect stories that can generate data and information for reporting. Communities and people need to take ownership of the processes. Indicators and targets are to be redefined, contextualized, and localized. Localization includes the recognition of local leadership, systems, and structures. It also includes the recognition of indigenous knowledge, local practices, and experiences in the implementations of the 2030 agenda. Implementation plan should articulate the disaggregated data collection processes, reporting, validation, and parameters in which these data are going to be used. In addition, these processes should include feedback mechanism and reporting back to the communities. Our communities need to receive adequate awareness and relevant training before being consulted. They should be making intervention from an informed position. Resources are to be mobilized to support evidence-based studies and research that help inform policymakers the necessary changes that need to happen. Last but not the least, succession planning. As visionary leaders, we should be including young people in the process at all levels. Programs are to be designed where we embark on the journey of imparting knowledge to our future generation before it is too late. We are living on borrowed time, and time is not on our side. I want to end by quoting An Australian Aboriginal proverbs, and I quote, "We are all visitors to this time, this place. We are just passing through. Our purpose here is to observe, to learn, to grow, to love, and then we return home," unquote. Time is not on our side, and we must act now. Governments and development partners cannot do it alone, and you need the support of the civil society, your communities, and the people in general in the implementation and the realizations of the 2030 Agenda. Moderator, and thank you kindly indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Tokoni. This concludes our roundtable. I now give back the floor to the Vice Chair, His Excellency Mr. Pagnatun Teng. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Tanaka, for your great moderation, and thank you to excellent panelists. Excellency, distinguished delegate, I am pleased to invite distinguished delegate to intervene on agenda item 5A, implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development at the sub-regional level. I will open the floor to statements from delegate in speaking order as received from Secretariat, from both participants present in the room and convened through Zoom. I kindly remind delegates to limit their statement to no longer than 3 minutes length to allow all delegates the opportunity to speak. I recognize the distinguished delegate from Maldives.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and colleagues. I wish to express my sincere appreciation for the comprehensive presentation and for the substantive report issued for consideration under this agenda item. Throughout the Asia and the Pacific, countries are struggling to achieve the SDGs. The COVID-19 pandemic, conflicts in different parts of the world, coupled with human-made and natural disasters, has derailed progress. What was meant to become the decade of action quickly turned into the decade of recovery. We are now at a critical juncture, the halfway point in our quest to achieve the SDGs. Yet in South and Southwest Asia, we are sadly not on track to reach any of the 17 SDGs by 2030. Although progress has been made, the pace of progress has been slow. Yet, as a region, we seem to be regressing the most in sustainable cities and communities, Goal 11, responsible consumption and production, Goal 12, and perhaps most worryingly for my country, climate action, Goal 13. We are in dire need of urgent strategic and concentrated efforts to accelerate progress towards achieving the SDGs in our sub-region. Excellencies, nationally, we are doing all we can to achieve the SDGs, especially Goal 13. The government's ambitious target of achieving net zero emissions by 2030 is still in full effect. We also aim to establish 70% of power generation capacity from renewable energy sources by 2030. However, we are also mindful that mitigation measures alone will not allow us to survive. We therefore require assistance to ensure we adapt to the raging climate crisis. In the recently concluded COP27, the Maldives played an active role, acting as a bridge between developed and developing countries. Our role was crucial to forge consensus to establish the Loss and Damage Fund. Let me take this opportunity to reiterate our call to work together to ensure the fund is operationalized in the lead up to COP28. Our region also needs predictable, sustainable, and adequate climate finance to ensure our progress towards achieving Goal 13 is back on track. In this regard, developed countries must fully deliver on the $100 billion per year financing pledge towards climate action, and with half of that allocated towards adaptation projects. Excellencies, we must support each other in our region to ensure all of us achieve the 2030 agenda. This must be done through collaborative efforts by sharing knowledge, technology, and financial support. We must increase South-South and triangular cooperation. We must collaborate on investment, trade, and research. Business as usual will simply not do anymore. The aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic has still left distress on the economies of all our countries. We must commit to ensure cooperation and solidarity at all levels. We must work together across countries, regions, and at the international level. The Maldives looks forward to presenting its second voluntary national review this year at the HLPF. I call on all of you to support us in this endeavor, and it is only with your support and solidarity that we can hope to achieve the 2030 agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, distinguished delegate from Maldives. So I invite distinguished delegate from Film for Peace Foundation, and to be followed by distinguished delegate from Philippines, please.
Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, I am Parvez Siddiqui of Film for Peace Foundation in Bangladesh and part of the International Migrants Alliance Asia Pacific. I wish to share the regional CSO collective statement summarizing the analysis and position of the Asia Pacific People's Forum on Sustainable Development. While the region was off track in achieving the 2030 agenda, systematic barriers continue to hamper full realization of people's rights and development justice, further deteriorated by the pandemic. COVID-19 recovery and responses are hijacked by the corporation and governments to continue with business as usual approach. Surging prices of basic commodities, debt distress, food, energy, and health challenges, rising unemployment, poverty, and climate crisis amidst the biggest cost of living crisis of the 21st century, exacerbate pre-existing inequalities and degradation of our ecosystem. We face disaster with Asia Pacific declared as most vulnerable to climate crisis. People and communities dependent on natural resources suffer chronic impact much earlier and deeper than predicted, requiring urgent mitigation and adaptation support. We need to ensure that those responsible for environmental degradation must commit the most of the technical, technological, and financial resources for mitigation and adaptation support in the global south. We see a decline in human rights protection and a consistent rise of authoritarian regimes. The right to freedom of expression and assembly, right of women and girls, migrants, human rights, and environmental defenders, minorities, media personnel, and civil society activists are violated with impunity by the state and non-state actors. We demand people-centered, right-based planning, implementation, and monitoring of the SDGs, centers the participation and leadership of the most marginalized. In advocacy spaces, it is unfortunate that despite being keen to participate in the South and Southwest Asia Forum on Sustainable Development organized in December 2022, CSOs in South Asia could not participate in the forum as there was a meager tokenistic support for their participation, prompting CSOs in the South Asia to decide against participation in the forum. We reiterate that participation of a very few CSOs curtailed inclusivity, diversity, and meaningfulness of the process against the 2030 agenda spirit of leaving no one behind. In the era of hegemonious discourse due to corporate capture of multilateralism, the challenges lies in how we bring our position and unities to the high-level political forum, SDG Summit, Summit of the Future, and other processes. Our position reflects grassroots people's struggles, success stories, and demands for genuine inclusive and sustainable development that prioritize human dignity and rights is given primacy over profit. We need to shift the power to the people as they urge action and demand real solution for a genuine transformative change for a just and fair future for all. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me move to distinguished delegate from United Blind Person of Fuji. So your limitation is 5 minutes, please.
Distinguished guest, Your Excellency, Bula Vinaka. The Asia and the Pacific region progress depends upon the urgent action required, not only to identify but to bring the furthest behind to the forefront of decision-making spaces, and strategically positioning itself through equity-centered leadership, strengthening partnerships, and transforming the rights-based policies and the implementation development plans of the 2030 agenda. This is emphasized through the Goal 10 of the inequality within and among countries. As global imperative it is with us and not for us. Long-standing disparity faced by persons with disabilities reflects significantly on the inequality of opportunities within the development spheres, such as access to basic health care, clean water and sanitation, clean energy, quality education, decent work, and financial inclusion, as well as other services which can potentially lead to economic and social empowerment, opportunities to participate equally within their communities. From available data in the Asia and the Pacific region, 21.6% of people with severe disabilities receive disability cash benefits. We urge all governments, private sector, civil society organizations, academias, communities, and individuals at all levels to strengthen cross-sectoral and work in tandem with organizations of persons with disabilities using the twin track approach to ensure persons with disabilities, in particular women, children, and young persons with disabilities, are not an afterthought, but remains at the heart of the matter. And the precondition to inclusion, such as accessibility, assistive devices, social protection, support services, community-based inclusive development, CBID, and non-discrimination are adhered to as prerequisites of the full inclusion and implementation of the 2030 agenda. If these preconditions are not realized, inclusion of all persons with disabilities won't be drastically undermined across all stages of development, widening the gap further and leaving them behind. Political will, disability, disaggregated data, adequate resourcing, genuine commitment through well-coordinated actions and partnerships are also key elements addressing the barriers faced by persons with disabilities. Presenting a unique opportunity to leverage partnerships right across the global to community level, and collectively design disability inclusive development and consultation with and for persons with disabilities towards accelerating the recovery of the coronavirus disease. It requires us persons with disabilities to be the core and the fundamental as contributors, planning, implementation, response, and monitoring, thus prohibiting us from any form of discrimination. Diversity of the disability community. Diversity equity of persons with disabilities is pivotal in achieving the pledge to leave no one behind and a critical test of accountability to the global commitments of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, 2030 Agenda, United Nations Disability Inclusion Strategy, Jakarta Declaration, 2022, Marrakesh Treaty, 2050 Strategy for the Blue Pacific Continent, Pacific Framework on the Rights of Persons with Disability, Sendai Framework, and the Ancient Strategy, strengthening the 2030 Agenda. Vinaka.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from United Blind Person of Fiji. So I may invite distinguished delegate from Indonesia, please.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to share that Indonesia has experienced substantial progress in SDGs implementation, both at the national and subnational levels. At the national level, more than half of the indicators have been met, while approximately 20% still require special attention. Significant progress has been made on goals 6 and 11 on access of water and sanitation, hand washing facilities, safe public transportation, water resources, and open green space. We also experience improvement on goals 7, 9, and 17, particularly on energy efficiency, sustainable industry, carbon emission reduction, export of high-tech industrial products, and data availability. At the same time, the government also focuses its efforts on overcoming several challenges in attaining the SDGs through disaster management prevention, ensuring equal access to electricity, distribution of digital infrastructure, accelerate the completion of industrial sites, and providing infrastructure for water supplies. In evaluating the implementation and attainment of the SDGs, particularly at the subnational level, the government of Indonesia recognizes that the availability and reliability of data is crucial. It is therefore important for the government to continue enhancing data quality and increase disaggregation to include disadvantaged groups. Ladies and gentlemen, the SDGs National Coordination Team of Indonesia continue to work closely with local governments and other stakeholders in advancing SDGs implementation. As for December 2022, 32 of the 38 provinces in Indonesia have enacted their regional action plans, which serve as foundations for implementing the SDGs. Universities and the academia community also make significant contributions by collaborating with local governments through the 37 SDG centers across Indonesia. International development partners are also involved in promoting and facilitating the implementation of the SDGs by local governments in Indonesia. In ensuring the attainment of all the SDGs by 2030, Indonesia put forward an inclusive approach in which We promote collaboration between all state, non-state actors, as well as relevant stakeholders at both national and subnational levels. We look forward to enhancing such inclusive collaboration to advance SDGs implementation in the region. I thank you.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from Indonesia. Distinguished delegate participant, in the interest of time, we will now move on to sub-agenda item 5B. For delegate who still wish to speak under agenda 5A, we will accommodate the request in the time allocated for statement in the sub-agenda item 5B or 5C. For the reporting and posting of the statement online, the Secretariat will note the corresponding sub-agenda item you have indicated on the statement request. Excellency, distinguished delegate, please allow me to move on to another sub-agenda item on progress toward attaining of Sustainable Development Goal 6, 7, 9, 11, and 17 at the regional level. The document pertinent to this session is Progress toward the achievement of Sustainable Development Goal 6, 7, 9, 11, and 17 at the regional level, ESCAP/RFSD/2023/INF/1. We will proceed with reporting from parallel SDG roundtables held yesterday and this morning. The 5 roundtables discussed the cluster of SDG under review in 2023, Sustainable Development Goal 6, 7, 9, 11, and 17. The discussion set out to establish a shared understanding of the outlook on the goal at the regional level and develop policy recommendation on regional priority for action on the goal. Each rapporteur has 3 minutes to deliver a summary of recommendation. Full recommendations are available on APFSD website, and they will be reflected in the charter summary. We will start with SDG 6 roundtable, clean water and sanitation, and I would like to invite Dr. John Doe, lead water specialist, development of foreign affairs and trade, Australia, to take the floor, please, for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the Roundtable on Sustainable Development Goal 6 on water and sanitation was organised by FAO, UNICEF and UNESCAP, with inputs from UNDP, UN Women, UNHRC and UNOPS under the overall coordination of UNESCAP. As the rapporteur of the discussion, please allow me to summarise the key policy recommendation to advance progress on SDG 6 in the Asia and Pacific region covered in the following strategic areas. Recommendation number 1, improve the quality of data collection and sharing. We discussed the need to improve the quality of water resources data. It is essential that the region collects high-quality data that is transparently accessible for all, as this singular action is fundamental to more informed water policies. Recommendation number 2, implement a range of inclusive strategies and actions. To improve governance and cooperation, the roundtable discussions called for inclusive multi-stakeholder approaches to policymaking to ensure the development of a shared vision of water management from local to transboundary levels. Efforts need to be informed by water tenure recognition and gender-responsive principles. Recommendation number 3, agricultural practices grounded in science. Water scarcity is an unescapable reality for most countries in the region. caused by unabating demands for food and worsened by climate change. There is a need to enhance agricultural production with considerations for limited water supply worsened by erratic impacts of climate change. Recommendation 4, Chair, increased commitment and funding to support water management and infrastructure. We discussed the need to increase funding to support water infrastructure, including for water sanitation and hygiene, and for management strategies such as integrated water resources management. While there are many strategies in place across the region, quite often there is poor implementation of water policy instruments due to less than optimal commitment and the lack of financial provisions to adequately support implementation. Recommendation number 5, capacity development. Across the region, there is a need for increasing water resource management and wash capacities to face the new realities of water scarcity and increasing demands on water resources. However, the SDG 6 Roundtable noted that this capacity development should not only occur at the government level, but it should also be available for youth and marginalised communities and civil society organisations. Recommendation number 6, transboundary cooperation. Implications of deficient transboundary water management are wide-ranging. They are often associated with profound hydrological and ecological changes due to upstream water infrastructure developments. Transboundary and regional cooperation should be a shared vision for the Asia-Pacific region to contribute to peace and security for all. Finally, recommendation number 7, climate change and disasters. Climate change is already with us and is expected to exacerbate our existing challenges. Aside from the devastation of climate hazards that result in the loss of human life and livelihoods threatening economic losses, climate change creates additional challenges for the sustainability of freshwater resources, and the region needs to be better prepared to address these. In conclusion, achieving SDG 6 is a complex and challenging task that requires the commitment of all stakeholders, from governments and civil society organisations to the private sector and individuals. We need to take bold actions, make difficult decisions and work together if we are to ensure that every person has access to clean water and sanitation. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you. Next, I would like to invite Mrs. Margarita Arabides, Head of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Policy and Sustainable Development Department, Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development, Georgia, and Associate Professor of the Energy Faculty of Georgian Technical University, as the rapporteur of SDG 7, Roundtable on Affordable and Clean Energy. To take the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair, and Your Excellency and distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. The Roundtable on Sustainable Development Goal and 7 on affordable and clean energy and was organized by UNEP, UNDP, and ESCAP, and they will input from a wide range of UN agencies and member states and stakeholders. The Roundtable policy discussion to advance and progress and SDG 7 in Asia reflected the following options. First, encourage and participate in the global and the methane and the pledge to accelerating SDG 7 and participating in countries and joining the global and methane pledge and launch at the United Nations and Framework Convention on the Climate Change COP26 in the Glasgow agreed and to take voluntary actions to contribute to a collective effort to reduce global methane emissions by at least 30% of the 2020 level by 2030. Encourage the implementation of the global roadmap for accelerated and the SDG 7 in support of the 2030 agenda for sustainable development and the Paris Agreement on climate change, stemming from the high levels and the dialogue on energy, which took place at the summit level on 24 September and 2021, and including encouraging public, private, and collaboration and partnership. Encouraging member states to consider and the finding of the 2021 ESCAP and policy and brief, slow and the advancements in the sustainable energy and taking the stock of the SDG 7 progress in Asia and the Pacific. Continue and to take measures to reduce the carbon intensity of all sector, particularly in the close and with the large emissions, and adopt and appropriate and enabling and policies and supportive and the measures and the through and coherent, integrated and approaches, including, and for example, in the transport and sector. Encourage and the sustainable and the rights and based and affordable and just energy transitions that respect and human rights and equal access to energy services and focused on the needs of peoples and groups is the vulnerable and the conflict and affected situations, including and targeted investment to community-led and the managed and small-scale and renewable energy projects. Encourage and increased and consultations on the SDG 7 and reporting, including and with women, young, local, and indigenous and communities, and as well as to respect and human rights and workers and rights. It was noted that large hydropower projects can have and environmental and the social and costs, and these should be minimized. Human and natural relationship can also be considered. Encouraging global and regional actions to close the clean and cooking gap through policies, interventions, planning and technology innovations, finance and partnership, including human in rural area. Encouraging adoption of the sustainable and cooling, including through national and cooling and action plans as haven't been and developed in Sri Lanka, China, and Vietnam. Encouraging regional and cooperation, including to encouraging cross-border energy trading and harmonized rules. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, I have the honor to invite Mrs. Isa Yumera Morini, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Information, Technology and Telecommunication, Pakistan, to present the report of SDG 9 Roundtable on Industrial Innovation and Infrastructure, please.
Thank you, Chair. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the Roundtable on SDG Goal 9 was organized by UNIDO in partnership with UNOPS, ITU, ESCAP, ILO, UNDRR, and UNDP. The SDG 9 Roundtable convened almost 100 experts and stakeholders from the Asia-Pacific region to discuss progress towards SDG 9 industry-related targets. The Roundtable provides the following outcomes. There were three actually groups. First one was industry, jobs, and greening the industry in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. The second one focused on innovation and digitalization for sustainable development, and the third one on resilient infrastructure. Some of the themes were common in all these groups, and first of all was the need for people-centered development with inclusive approaches. And it was highlighted that empowering women and young and people with disabilities need to be prioritized in industrial development and technology upgradation. Similarly, in Group 2 also, the same theme reverberated very loudly, and the importance of leaving no one behind and having inclusive policy was highlighted. And while discussing that, projects such as Smart Village, ICT for Girls, Digital Inclusion Week, and Child Online Protection were specifically mentioned for promoting the agenda of taking everyone along. Similarly, in the third topic, resilient infrastructure, it was highlighted that there is a need for more agile and anticipatory governance, which should be able to focus on early warning, and the systems should provide targeted support and quality infrastructure that can increase growth and innovation potential for SMEs. Another important recommendation which came up was the need for arranging financing mechanisms. Public-private financing investment vehicles need to be created, and in that regard, many participants suggested for a more strategic approach at the national level to promote R&D and scientific research and development for marginalized groups. STEM education was also mentioned by several people, and it needs to be focused in a more inclusive manner. Chair, some of the recommendations included availability of data and its proper usage, especially the importance of disaggregated data for monitoring policies leading to sustainable infrastructure and resilient industrial development. And then multi-stakeholder and multi-sectoral approaches are required. So these are some of the themes. And towards the end, it was also highlighted that ICT could be leveraged to achieve all SDGs. That's all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Bernardia Chandra Devi, Secretary General, United City and Local Government, Asia Pacific, Rapporteur of SDG 11, Roundtable on Sustainable City and Community, to take the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon. The Roundtable on Sustainable Development Goal 11 was organized by UN ESCAP and UN Habitat in partnership with UNEP, UNDRR, UNDP, UNOPS, UN Women and UN Human Rights. SDG 11 strives to make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable, provided several recommendations to make further progress on the goal in Asia and the Pacific. Asia-Pacific countries need bold action and decision to upscale solution for SDG 11 and to localize a whole of government and society approach for all goals. Decentralization policies cannot merely exist on paper. An effective political, fiscal, and institutional enabling environment for all local actors is essential. Leadership for SDG 11 from local governments and communities is essential to accelerate progress. Recommendations on effort to build an enabling environment and coherence across different spheres of government and society for stronger progress against SDG 11 included the following. First, we need harmonized and inclusive local data platforms in synergy with central data platforms which support meaningful participation and mutual accountability across local governments and community actors. This needs to be further accompanied by investments in data literacy for local governments and communities. Second, Asia-Pacific needs to make its urban, territorial, and spatial planning processes less technocratic and more people-centered. Green and blue infrastructure instruments need to be integrated into spatial planning instruments, and their social and economic co-benefits emphasized across rural and urban landscapes. Third, inclusive urban governance needs to focus on the right to the city and be co-produced with all genders, people with disabilities, and the youth actors to leave no one and no place behind. The practice of forced eviction and resettlements continues to constitute a gross violation of human rights, in particular the right to adequate housing. We emphasize the obligation of states and local authorities to refrain from to refrain from and protect against forced evictions from homes and lands. Finally, national and local governments in partnership with communities play a significant role in leading multi-level climate and urban action in the Asia-Pacific region. Financing and implementation of integrated climate and disaster risk reduction plans and policies across the continuum of human settlements is critical for low carbon, climate resilience, economically vibrant, and livable cities. Thank you very much. Kak Pungka.
Thank you. And last but not least, I would like to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Ewa Abdullah, Deputy Speaker, Parliament of Maldives, Rapporteur of SDG 17 Roundtable on Partnership for the Goal, to present, please.
Thank you, Chair. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. The Roundtable on Sustainable Development Goal 17 on Partnerships for the Goals was organized by ESCAP, ILO with inputs from the United Nations Office for South-to-South Cooperation and UNDP. Goal 17 is critical in this decade of action to bolster the other 16 SDGs and accelerate implementation. The Roundtable focused on policy priorities under the themes of finance, trade, capacity building, and partnerships. We highlighted 6 key areas to advance progress on SDG 17 in the Asia and the Pacific region. Firstly, accelerate efforts to expand the fiscal space with improvements in mobilization of public resources and debt sustainability. The Roundtable highlighted the need to fast-forward tax policy reform and agenda, including the digitalization of tax administrations and establishment of carbon tax. Governments and the private sector need to direct more funding for sustainable development, and international community need to extend more concessional finance and address sizable illicit financing flows. Second, scale up access to sustainable finance instruments and develop necessary regulatory frameworks. The discussion emphasized the need to address fundamental issues as prerequisites to improve their functioning. These include, among many others, preventing greenwashing and green laundering, promoting accountability and good governance through strengthened regulatory frameworks, and establishing green taxonomies to provide clear market guidance. Thirdly, accelerate customs and trade digitalization to streamline trade procedures, reduce trade costs, and make trade more inclusive. The Roundtable discussion recognized the need to accede to the Framework Agreement on Facilitation of Cross-Border Paperless Trade in Asia and the Pacific. Fourthly, accelerate regional cooperation and integration efforts, leveraging the existing regional economic partnerships such as the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation was noted to enable progress on trade for sustainable development. 5, enhance modalities such as South-South cooperation while ensuring that the needs of people and the planet are at the center. In this regard, consensus building with local governments and civil society organizations was considered critical. And lastly, increase national level capacities to address data gaps. The Roundtable discussed the importance of capacity building efforts that address the needs of marginalized groups of the society. In addition, the need for inclusive measures of progress that is in line with the concept of beyond GDP was highlighted to be crucial to capture environmental sustainability and well-being. To conclude, integrated efforts are required by governments, development partners, private sector, civil society, trade union organizations, and other stakeholders at the regional, sub-regional, national, and local levels to create the synergies required to deliver system transformations and achieve the targets of Goal 17. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Distinguished colleagues, I would like to thank all your brief and concise report and for conveying those key messages from the SDG Roundtable. Excellency, distinguished delegate, I am pleased to invite distinguished delegate to intervene on agenda item 5B, implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development at the sub-regional level. I will open the floor to statement from delegate in the speaking order as received from Secretariat from both participants present in the room and connected through Zoom. I kindly remind delegates to limit their statement to no longer than 3 minutes length to allow all delegates the opportunity to speak. From the list of Secretariat, so I recognize the distinguished delegate from Thailand to be followed by ESCAP Sustainable Business Network, please.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is great pleasure for Thailand to update our progress toward the attainment of the selected SDGs. In these recent years, Thailand has done a number of programs to achieve our SDG targets. For SDG 6, Thailand is actively engaged in efforts to ensure access to clean water and sanitation across the countries. The National Water Resources Committee has been set up to oversee comprehensive water resource issues through the 20 years water management plan, which aims at addressing water-related challenges at all stages, from upstream to downstream. Moreover, the government has implemented several programs that involve public participation and collaborations with local governments. This initiative seeks to reduce water pollution, prepare for seasonal disasters, and improve water governance and securities. To achieve SDG 7, Thailand has made significant efforts to ensure nationwide access to affordable and reliable energy services by 2030. The Energy Transition Plan has recently been implemented, which comprises 4 dimensions, including promoting clean energies, sourcing national gases, supporting bioenergies, and improving energy management and services. The government is actively pursuing strategies to promote electric vehicles with the goal of 50% of new car productions to be all electric by 2030. Significant progress toward achieving SDG 9 has been made through continuous investment in infrastructure development, especially the improvements of digital infrastructures and transportation. Thailand is now in the process of transforming the manufacturing and service sectors toward an innovation-based economy. The key policy is to foster value-added enhancements through creativities, technologies, and innovations, while advocating for environmental friendly business practices and establishing a supportive ecosystem for BTG economy. In order to reach SDG 11, Thailand has adopted the SDG localization approach, aiming to outline the priorities and strategies for achieving the SDGs in each province based on their potentials and development status. To achieve this, we focus on raising awareness and enhancing capabilities of local organizations, encouraging collaborations among relevant partners, and creating an enabling environment for sustainable development. For SDG 17, Thailand has made consistent endeavors to create a system for harmonizing efforts among stakeholders and promote collaboration between the governments, civil societies, private sectors, and international organizations, particularly by integrating the SDGs and the public participation process into our level development plans. We have demonstrated our unwavering commitment to ensure coherence and cooperation across our government agencies, including local authorities and the people. Thank you for your attention.
Yeah, next I would like to invite distinguished from ESCAP Sustainable Business Network through video, and then to be followed by India, please.
Distinguished delegates, the ESCAP Sustainable Business Network, or ESBN, represents businesses of the Asia-Pacific region committed to development that is sustainable and inclusive, creating infrastructure, ecosystems, technology, logistics, goods and services to improve people's lives and to create a more sustainable and inclusive future for all. Our region's good initial momentum in building back from the COVID-19 pandemic can only be enhanced if businesses and governments invest more and faster in smarter, greener solutions. That is what building back better and faster must mean. Businesses must proactively collaborate and lead our region's green transformation if we are to achieve the global goals agreed by world leaders in 2015. The Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. We share the recognition at COP26 that the world must move into emergency mode to address the urgent challenge of climate change, and we urge governments to create clear and predictable policy frameworks that promote and facilitate innovation and green transformation to net zero carbon emissions. We are dedicated to working together in partnership among businesses, governments, and communities to enable and accelerate green transformation towards a more sustainable and inclusive economy. We will proactively align our business strategies and operations with environmental, social, and governance, or ESG principles, to build back better and faster from the COVID-19 pandemic and to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We need our own version of a Green Deal for the Asia-Pacific region, with more businesses mobilized or working hand in hand with governments and communities to develop new business models aimed at creating new and sustainable employment and better outcomes for the environment. We are therefore implementing the Asia-Pacific Green Deal for business, and we are urging all Asia-Pacific businesses to sign up for and to support it by taking specific quick actions in the following 5 key areas, which are also the 5 pillars of the Asia-Pacific Green Deal for business. First, green energy, advancing a zero carbon, affordable and resilient energy system. Second, green infrastructure and logistics, building smart, low carbon, water secure and climate resilient cities, buildings and other infrastructure designed for walkability and low carbon mobility. Third, green finance, mobilizing public and private investment for green transformation in the energy, infrastructure and logistics, as well as sustainable and inclusive innovation for the new economy, and promoting and facilitating responsible investing and responsible banking. Fourth, green innovation, accelerating and scaling up new technologies and applications to improve efficiency, lower costs, and reduce environmental impact from the way we live, work, trade, and conduct business. Fifth, green production, consumption, and waste management, changing towards a more circular economy with new business and employment opportunities to minimize environmental impacts and dependencies. We are launching the Asia-Pacific Green Deal for Business to demonstrate our conviction that business must take a leading role in the green transformation of our region for the good of the world. In the Asia-Pacific region, we are committed to balancing our development aspirations with our responsibility to protect the earth. The Asia-Pacific Green Deal for Business is all about harnessing transformational opportunities of a new green economy. It is more than building back better and faster from the COVID-19 pandemic. It is about building back smarter and greener together. We urge businesses to join the ESBN in implementing the Asia-Pacific Green Deal for Business to further enable and accelerate green transformation in our region, as well as the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Thank you.
Thank you. So next, I would like to invite distinguished delegate from India, and then followed by United City and local government Asia Pacific, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. A very good afternoon to all of you. Mr. Chair, India has made a steady progress towards achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, especially in areas like access to clean water, sanitation, clean energy, and infrastructure. This improvement is due to the initiatives like housing for all, electricity to every household, toilet for every family, cleaning and clean cooking gas, financial inclusion, social security, affordable healthcare for all, expansion of road infrastructure, improved broadband connectivity, and similar other initiatives taken by the Government of India to improve the quality of life of the people, especially of those living in rural areas. Mr. Chair, improving sanitation and access to clean water has been a key priority area of the Government of India, and several flagship programs like the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan or the Clean India Mission campaign, Namami Gange or the rejuvenation and conservation of river Ganges, Jal Jeevan Mission are being implemented in line with SDG number 6. India has ensured adequate funds for all these flagship programs. Jal Jeevan Mission is being implemented by India to provide safe and adequate drinking water through individual household tap connections by 2024 to all households in rural India. The program also implements source sustainability measures as mandatory elements, such as recharge and reuse through grey water management, water conservation, rainwater harvesting. More than 110 million rural households have been provided with tap water connections under the mission. India has been exemplary in its endeavor to achieve the goal of no poverty. India's incidence of poverty has reduced from 55.1% in 2005 to 16.4% in 2021. We have been successful in getting 415 million people, yes, 415 million people out of poverty during this period. As a large developing economy with more than 1.3 billion people, India's climate adaptation and mitigation ambitions are not just transformational for India, but for the entire planet. India stands committed to reduce emissions intensity of its GDP by 45% by 2030 from 2005 level and achieve about 50% cumulative electric power installed capacity from non-fossil fuel-based energy resources by 2030. In line with the objectives of low carbon intensity approach, the Government of India has approved Green Hydrogen Mission for development of green hydrogen production capacity of at least 5 million metric tons per annum with an associated renewable energy capacity addition of around 125 gigawatts in the country. Recognizing that lifestyle has a big role in climate change, the Honorable Prime Minister of India has at COP26 proposed a one-word movement to the global community. This one word is life, L-I-F-E, that is lifestyle for environment. The vision of life is to live a lifestyle that is in tune with our planet and does not harm it. Life envisions replacing the prevalent use and dispose economy with a circular economy. The mission intends to nudge individuals to undertake simple acts in their daily lives that can contribute significantly to climate change when embraced across the world. Life plans to leverage the strength of social networks to influence social norms surrounding climate. India has made considerable progress in the provision of basic infrastructure in the form of construction of national highways, ports, and industrial corridors to promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization. India currently ranks 40th in the Global Innovation Index 2022 of WIPO. A national logistics policy has been unveiled to create a digitally integrated, cost-efficient and sustainable logistics ecosystem in the country. that will bring down the logistics cost in line with the global benchmarks by 2030. To conclude, India places high priority on sustainability and environment for transforming cities and city regions through implementation of national missions, namely Clean India, Housing for All, Smart Cities, Namami Gange, and Digital India, among others. These missions have been instrumental in addressing urban necessities. For example, the Prime Minister Urban Housing Mission. Under this mission, more than 12 million houses have been sanctioned, out of which more than 6.4 million have been completed. We hope the discussions and deliberations of this forum help expedite action and progress on achieving Agenda 2030. Thank you, Chair. Thank you all.
Thank you, the distinguished delegate from India. Next, I would like to invite a distinguished delegate from United City and Local Government Asia Pacific, please.
Excellencies, fellow leaders, distinguished delegates, a pleasant day to everyone. Mabuhay. I am Mayor Jermelina Singson Goulart, Vice President of the League of Municipalities of the Philippines and representing the League in this forum. However, I speak on behalf of the organized constituency of local authorities under the framework of the Asia Pacific Local Government Coordinating Body facilitated by the United Cities and Local Governments Asia Pacific. Achieving the SDGs is crucial in creating a more sustainable and equitable future for all. By implementing the SDGs as public service delivery, governments can help to promote economic growth, social inclusion, and environmental sustainability, while also addressing the unique challenges and opportunities faced by the communities. The local governments show commitment to sustainable development and cooperate with other stakeholders to take action in many ways, such as in the development of the voluntary local review. This can help create a momentum for positive change, ultimately leading to more sustainable and resilient communities. SDG 11 is an essential goal for promoting sustainable development in the Asia-Pacific region. Local governments in the region have a vital role to play in achieving this goal, as they are often responsible for the planning and development of cities and communities. To implement SDG 11, local governments have taken several steps. Firstly, we work towards creating more sustainable and resilient cities and communities by prioritizing investments in infrastructure and services that promote sustainability, such as public transportation, energy-efficient buildings, and green spaces. Secondly, local governments engage with their communities to promote sustainable behavior and practices such as reducing waste, conserving energy, and building climate and disaster resilience. This can be done through public awareness campaigns, education initiatives, and community engagement programs. Thirdly, local governments work collaboratively with other stakeholders such as the private sector, civil society organizations, and the academia to promote sustainable development. This can involve partnership to finance and implement sustainable development programs and projects, share knowledge, upscale good practices and innovations, leverage sources and expertise, and have multiplier effect. SDG 11 on sustainable cities and communities is not an SDG of local governments, but an SDG for the people and the world. Throughout the forum, there has been a clear recognition of the significant role of localization. Localization and SDG 11 are crucial enablers of the SDG that must be invested upon. Local governments continue to stand ready to work with national governments, international organizations, UN bodies, and all stakeholders to achieve the SDG. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, distinguished delegate and participant. In the interest of time, we will now move on to sub-agenda item 5C. For delegate who still wish to speak under 5B, we will have accommodated the request in the time allotted. For statement in sub-agenda item 5C, for the reporting and posting of statement online, the Secretariat will note the corresponding sub-agenda item you have indicated on the statement request. Let me proceed next with the last sub-agenda item on United Nations Development System, wide result at the regional level in Asia and Pacific in support of the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. At the outset, we will hear a presentation of highlights of the system-wide result of United Nations Development System at the regional level by the co-vice chair of the Regional Collaborative Platform for Asia and the Pacific. It is my pleasure now to invite Madam Executive Secretary to take the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellencies, distinguished participants. The reform of the UN development system is already evident in our work. As elements of the reform take root, we are stepping up support to countries to turn the necessary transformations for the Sustainable Development Goals into reality. UN-wide collaboration is particularly important this year as many global initiatives gather pace. We are uniquely placed as we are the interlocutor between the global and national levels. Here at APFSD, the Regional United Nations Development System is working together to build positive and action-oriented momentum for global dialogues. For example, our dedicated high-level segment at the SDG Summit has brought to life new commitments and transformative initiatives from governments and stakeholders, from inclusive urban development and disability-inclusive development to financing the net zero transitions. The special dialogues this coming Friday will help us identify the way forward to turn commitments of the Transforming Education Summit and Food System Summit into actions. At the regional level, our work has focused on helping countries and stakeholders take stock of regional progress and craft more ambitious regional commitments. The Asia-Pacific SDG Progress Assessment that informed your discussion at APFSD 2023 is the joint analysis of 8 regional UN entities with the facilitation of ESCAP. It helps us to understand where we are with the SDGs, to identify where we need to invest more, and to identify where data gaps exist. Our data work is then channeled to the country level, with and through the resident coordinators and the UN country teams to deliver dedicated trainings to the national statistical system. The new Regional Action Program on Air Pollution, endorsed at the 7th session of ESCAP Committee on Environment and Development, is the first intergovernmentally agreed framework to tackle air pollution. It is our region's response to the chronic threats to the well-being of 4 billion people of Asia and the Pacific. The action plan is now taken forward by the Regional United Nations Development System to improve air quality through better air quality management, better data, and closer regional cooperation. We are also helping countries in our region to better prepare for a future of cascading risk. The regional review of the Sendai framework in Asia-Pacific drew on our collective expertise to reflect on the unique vulnerability of the region and to place the necessary spotlight on resilience. We are heading the analytical and technical support in this area from all fronts with the issue-based coalition, not only from the disaster risk reduction perspective, but also from the gender equality, human rights, and climate change mitigation perspectives. Finally, I would like to highlight our UN-wide collaboration with sub-regional organizations, bringing synergy between the 2030 Agenda and the sub-regional platform and processes. For example, in Southeast Asia, our work with ASEAN has been scaled up on many fronts, guided by the UN-ASEAN Plan of Action. Our collaboration with the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights is advancing in the development of a regional framework on environmental rights, something that was acknowledged by the ASEAN leaders in the chair's statement at the ASEAN UN Summit in Cambodia last year. Excellencies, distinguished participants, allow me to reiterate that the UN is acting as one in the region to help our countries navigate crisis and get back on track with the SDGs, from tackling to building resilience to disasters, promoting gender equality and human rights. We are also helping to generate momentum for global agendas, including SDG stocktake, education and food system. We deliver unified policy advice to our member states, the resident coordinators and UN country teams, something that my co-vice chair will speak to in more detail. Let me now hand over to Kani Wignaraja, my co-vice chair.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, let me now highlight some of the concrete results at the country level to give you a flavor of how our work in the region has helped the UN development system actually then deliver their results for you. Now, as we all know, polycrises have dominated our 2022. Food, finance, debt, cost of living, climate catastrophes have hit several countries and all at once. Scarcity, shortages have amplified insecurities, and the vulnerability gaps have just ballooned. So through the year, we helped the UN country teams to unpack these layers of development risk and uncertainty faced by our countries, governments, institutions, people at very local levels, and upon request to identify options to get the SDGs back on track. Let me just take a few examples. In Sri Lanka, as the socioeconomic and financial crisis was unraveling at a rapid pace at the beginning of last year, with the resident coordinator and the UNCT, we made available our regional expertise on SDG financing and macroeconomic analysis to develop recovery scenarios, options to help national institutions and leadership prepare for their own debt restructuring and the upcoming IMF discussions. The 2022 review of climate ambition in Asia and the Pacific has been the basis for our strategic dialogues with our UN country teams as they helped countries prepare for COP27 and now the next steps. SDG data remains a stumbling block, and this is very worrying for some of our countries. Our regional working group on SDG data and statistics provided direct training for UN and National Statistical Commission colleagues on closing some of these data gaps and bolstering statistical systems capacities. All of this will continue. Unfortunately, 2022 was also a year of rapid, intensive natural disasters that brought devastation. Even if we just looked weeks ago, we saw the destruction in Vanuatu. So through regional expertise and practices shared, we have supported governments to unpack complex disaster risk and further update early warning systems. As countries gathered for the midterm review of the Sendai framework, national stakeholders in Vietnam, Bangladesh, and the Philippines shared and reflected on lessons and the changes needed to their DRR national systems, helping others also understand what more is needed. Armed with this, in Papua New Guinea and the Maldives, we examined the regional and country support needed in the intense new realities of climate-related disasters. And now our UNCTs in all these countries are working very closely with their national counterparts, and we continue to provide and accompany at the regional level. If I switch to a different area, our teams in Lao PDR, Myanmar, and Thailand explored how to translate the Secretary General's call to action for human rights into concrete actions and how to embed the principles of rights, gender equality, justice, leaving no one behind throughout common country assessments and the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation frameworks. In this regard, the regional peer support group, our IBCs, and regional groups have all been a key source of ideas, advice, and expertise for developing a new generation of ambitious cooperation frameworks that help us navigate in Mongolia, India, Sri Lanka, Iran, Nepal, Pakistan, Bhutan, the Philippines, Papua New Guinea, and the Pacific, all in 2022. Finally, and so critically, we have been there as regional directors to support our RCs and UNCTs in tough, challenging crisis contexts, and have been a go-to regional director group for them to turn to for support and to ensure that we all stand as one behind common approaches, standard operating mechanisms, advocacy, and direct support to people-focused, people-centered, life and livelihood-saving interventions. So from relief to basic services, from livelihood support to making sure local systems work for the most vulnerable, we have been there as a group of regional directors in support of our UN country teams. These are just highlights that provide a glimpse into our collective achievements under the regional collaborative platform. We have made a lot of progress towards increasing UN cohesion at the regional level and are better able to respond together for our UNCTs. More can always be done, and we look forward to receiving your feedback. Thank you.
Many thanks, Madam Executive Secretary and Madam Kanichi Wikaraja, and Excellency distinguished delegate. I am now pleased to invite the distinguished delegate to intervene on agenda item 5, review of regional progress and opportunity for achieving the SDG. I will open the floor to statement from delegate in the speaking order as received from the Secretariat from both participants present in the room and connected through Zoom. I kindly remind delegates to limit their statement to no longer than 3 minutes length to allow all delegates the opportunity to speak. I recognize distinguished delegate from China to be followed by distinguished delegate from Northeast Affected Area Development Society, please.
主席先生、女士们、直密女士、主席先生、直密女士、女士们、先生们，我愿意就议题5A、B、C 3个分议题一并做简短评论。首先，中国代表团支持 ESCAP及其 次区域办公室，在各个层级推动地区互联互通和区域经济一体化，协助成员国加快实施2030年发展议程的各项目标。第二，中国代表团支持联合国系统整合资源，各个机构充分发挥各自的专长和比较优势，为成员国提供更高效的服务。联合国系统应该继续在国际发展的合作中发挥核心的作用，结合各国，尤其是发展中国家的实际需要，同全球、区域、次区域发展合作进程深入对接。第三，中国将继续支持 ESCAP 在区域层级的联合国发展协作机制中发挥核心协调作用，共同推动区域可持续发展。第四，中国率先实现了联合国1000年发展目标，我们将克服 polycrisis 多重挑战，继续积极推动落实2030年可持续发展议程。与此同时，中国将继续深化南南合作，为联合国系统提供稳定有力的支持，为其他发展中国家实现可持续发展提供力所能及的帮助。中方提出了全球发展倡议，重振全球发展伙伴关系，深化8大领域务实合作，相信将为加快落实2030年议程提供助力。谢谢。
Thank you. So next, I would like to invite the distinguished delegate from Northeast Africa Area Development Society, and followed by Hong Kong, China, please.
Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I am representing Northeast Affected Area Development Society, Assam, from northeast part of India, and speak here on behalf of the constituency, people affected by conflict and disasters of APRCM. Asia-Pacific region is highly vulnerable to increased humanitarian crisis, protracted disasters, and climate crisis, with many countries in the top of the climate change risk index. Most of the disaster displacement recorded globally has taken place in the region, with an estimated 225.3 million internal displacement or forced movements. In Southeast Asia, Northeast Asia, with a growing war and conflict situation, militarization, weak governance, and political instability, the need for humanitarian assistance is in rising trend, which are also impacting implementation and progress of SDG in the region. We see a worrying trend of many UN agencies highlighting plight of people for raising more funds to meet humanitarian needs. However, we don't see equal political efforts invested in seeking early and durable solution to shrink the needs of conflict and disaster affected population. Across the Asia, development aggression and plight of indigenous peoples are mounting in form of land grabbing, extractive industries, large scale mining, large energy infrastructure projects, agribusiness, causing displacement of millions of indigenous peoples from their land and territories. Development-induced disasters are increasing. People's rights are systematically violated, which has been resulting in increased marginalization. We recommend that these systemic barriers are recognized and addressed in favor of people demanding development justice and accountability. We believe that humanitarian aid and needs of affected people can be better addressed by involving feedback from the people affected by crisis to ensuring that the funds are being spent to meet the needs of the affected population. Local communities need to be consulted and included in the process with dignity for control over resources and a better community-led response. Humanitarian aid must go hand in hand with concerted efforts on humanitarian advocacy and political action by states to find durable solution. There is a vital need to integrate the nexus approach of humanitarian development, peace, and climate change in global humanitarian response plan. We advocate to devolve power to local responders in the developing countries. Funding and decision-making power is needed at the local level. Donors must adopt action on their grand bargain commitments. Just to conclude, we believe that sustainable and effective climate response must have local priorities at their core, as local actors and at-risk communities are best placed to identify problems and solutions based in their traditional knowledge. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, distinguished delegate from Northeast African Development Society. So next, I would like to invite distinguished delegate from Hong Kong, China, and to be followed by Karachi Research Center, please.
Your Excellency and distinguished delegates, I have the honor to update Hong Kong, China's latest progress on advancing UN SDG 7. The Hong Kong Special Administrative Region government has set ambitious and progressive targets to align with our country's commitment to peak carbon emissions before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. In our climate action plan promulgated in 2021, we have adopted net zero electricity generation as one of our main strategies, and we would progressively increase the use of zero carbon energy in order to achieve the target of net zero carbon emissions in electricity generation before 2050. To expedite energy transformation, we have already met our target of reducing the share of coal in the Hong Kong SAR's overall fuel mix for electricity generation from half in 2015 to a quarter in 2020. 12.2 billion Hong Kong dollars is allocated for providing subsidies to alleviate the burden in the course of energy transition. We will strive to increase the share of zero carbon energy in the fuel mix for electricity generation to 60 to 70% before 2035 through the distinctive advantage of enjoying strong national support. We will seize the opportunities brought by low-carbon transformation and development of the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area to strengthen regional cooperation and increase the supply of another one-third of zero-carbon energy through the construction of new electricity facilities. Despite our geographical constraints, we have been ramping up the development of renewable energy. We are striving to develop more advanced waste-to-energy facilities to turn municipal solid and food waste into electricity, as well as larger-scale renewable energy projects such as floating solar energy generation systems. Another 3 billion Hong Kong dollars is allocated to install renewable energy systems at government premises. Renewable energy features have also been applied into the design of public housing estates, which accommodate half of our population. We have introduced a feed-in tariff scheme whereby investors can receive relatively high payments as incentives as compared with major international cities. Since its inception in 2018, over 21,000 applications have been approved, and the electricity generated can meet the demand of 100,000 households. We have also installed solar energy generation systems for hundreds of schools and welfare organizations. Leading private enterprises and public institutions in the Hong Kong SAR have joined the government's carbon neutrality partnership and pledged to take the lead to deepen and accelerate their pace in pursuing low carbon transformation. For trial of new technologies, we have allocated 400 million Hong Kong dollars to the Green Tech Fund and are developing hydrogen for trial in the Hong Kong SAR. The Hong Kong SAR has always prided ourselves in our nature conservation and our country parks, which take up about 40% of our land. We have designated 2 more marine parks in the past 3 years and will designate another major country park bordering Shenzhen and 1 additional marine park, which would create great synergy on nature conservation. The Hong Kong SAR is now fully open to visitors and tourists as before. We sincerely welcome you all to visit the Hong Kong SAR to experience our green conservation and sustainability efforts, as well as the vibrancy of an international trade and financial center. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next, I invite distinguished delegate from Karachi Research Center and to be followed by Islamic Republic of Iran. Please.
Excellencies, delegates, and colleagues. I'm Ali Jilani speaking on behalf of the NGO constituency of APRSEM. The multidimensionality of the current crises has exacerbated inequalities, exposed shallow public service infrastructures, and questioned our collective ability to respond in the absence of strong political will to address the systemic barriers. Meanwhile, the Asia-Pacific, along with all its sub-regions and countries, continue to be confronted with decaying socioeconomic and ecological systems, policy and fiscal space constraints, illicit financial flows, unfair trade and investment regimes, unscrupulous debt distress, and the insatiable IFI conditionalities restricting national capacities to adopt people-centered, right-based, transformative strategies for the SDGs or COVID recovery. In the face of current failures, with the entire regions falling behind on the SDGs, it is high time that we prioritized urgent action on fundamental reforms as the structures critical for action are falling apart with the demise of public trust, surging socio-cultural and politico-economic inequalities, shrinking democratic spaces, and ever-exacerbating unequal power relations. This is compounded by the crisis in thought leadership, where the rhetoric of action-oriented and transformative is barely reconciled with the reality and continues to prioritize consensus over critical considerations even in the decade of action and delivery. Excellencies, it is imperative to address the splits in our critical consciousness, where the global military expenditure crossed the $2 trillion mark for the first time in 2021, whereas compared to mere $185 billion for development, certainly not in line with our pursuit of policy coherence for sustainable development. Parallelly, the illicit financial flows amounted to $7.8 trillion between 2004 to 2013, 5 times more than the ODA in the same time frame, while only accounting for trade mispricing, not factoring tax evasions, asset stealth, and profit shifting by multinational corporations. This is compounded by neoliberal instruments like the investor-state dispute settlement, where my own country, Pakistan, was fined with over $5 billion through ISDS, not very far in the past, while already debt distressed. It is high time that we alter the business as usual approach by democratizing the terms of discussion around means of implementation to ensure equitable financing, technical and technological support for regions, peoples, and priorities left behind, because although we're halfway there, yet we are nowhere near. Finally, the essence of partnership requires broader and meaningful civil society participation, parallel with the immediate reversal of corporate corporatization of our deliberative processes to safeguard our democracies for an inclusive, efficient, and responsive multilateralism. It is upon us today, Excellencies, to adopt development justice now with bravery and conviction to ensure that we do not leave our generations of the future behind by adopting approaches that prioritize people and the planet over profits. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next, I would like to invite distinguished delegate from Islamic Republic of Iran, and then to be followed by Tuni Bung, please.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, the Islamic Republic of Iran is the fifth largest country in terms of number of refugees it houses. Despite the various challenges and sanctions imposed on my country, more than 5 million Afghan refugees now live in Iran for the time being. It is urgent that the immediate international assistance is required to fulfill their needs. As a basic need and right, the Islamic Republic of Iran has made great efforts and will continue its efforts to ensure that everyone has access to clean, safe, and reliable water as well as sanitary facilities. In closing, let me express and underline the Islamic Republic of Iran's readiness to cooperate with the other countries at the regional and global levels to accomplish our shared objectives. Our collective efforts must be accompanied by results that have been practical guarantees for the sustainable development of developing countries. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So next, I would like to invite the distinguished delegate from Tunibung and then to be followed by Fiji, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm reading this statement on behalf of the representative of the Indigenous Peoples Constituency. Mr. Chair, there's a high need for participatory and comprehensive review of the progress and the challenges, the non-fulfillment of the SDG goals and the increased marginalization and threats to the very survival of indigenous peoples. The full and effective participation of indigenous peoples in the preparation of the summit and the actual conduct of the summit is needed to ensure that the specific needs, priorities, and recommendation of indigenous peoples in relation to accelerating the implementation of the SDGs are heard. We therefore put forward the following demands and in realizing the full and effective participation indigenous peoples in the implementation of the SDGs at all levels. First, we like to make sure that the recognition of indigenous peoples' roles in realizing the SDG, including the process of monitoring and reporting of the implementation process at every country level. Ensure and support the participation of indigenous peoples, including providing interpretation in the preparation and review of the implementation of the SDGs during the summits and any forum. Indigenous peoples should be fully consulted and involved in all processes, in a process of finalization and adoption of political statement. The political declaration of the summit should strengthen the recognition of the role, the rights of indigenous peoples' rights, and in sustainable development. The summit and outcome of the statement should identify gaps and systematic barriers in realizing the SDGs with the involvement of indigenous peoples. Resign development model perpetrating development injustices and repression on indigenous people. Strengthen the accountability of mechanisms to develop the stakeholders such as private sector, international financing institution that targets indigenous land. We look forward to see the demands are duly taken into consideration to ensure that acceleration in the implementation of the SDGs in our region. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next, I would like to invite distinguished delegate from Fiji and then to be followed by United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, please.
Thank you, Chair. My intervention focuses on SDG 7 and drawing on the challenges we do face in the Pacific. Fiji has progressed actions on SDG Target 7.1. In 2021, we had completed over 98% of the population with access to electricity, up from 95.3% in 2017. However, to ensure universal access to all Fijians, we are working on reaching our remaining 1.8% of the population. On Target 7.2 on clean energy, Fiji is heavily reliant on imported energy resources. Energy security is high on Fiji's agenda. Government is very supportive of renewable energy resources and actively seek partners in the energy sector, which will help us increase our renewable energy generation capacity and energy mix. Therefore, our key aims include diversification of the power generation mix with a focus on indigenous sources like solar and hydro, and a reduction in the reliance on imported petroleum fuel. Currently, approximately 45% of Fiji's power needs are supplied through fossil fuels, 50% through hydropower, and the remaining 5% from biomass and wind. However, as an island nation, Fiji's fossil fuel needs are almost entirely reliant upon imports, generating a fuel import bill which accounted for 20% of the country's total imports in 2019. On Target 7.3 on energy efficiency, it is thought that achieving energy efficiency by 2030 in a developing island country like mine would be a significant challenge. A number of donor-funded projects are in the pipeline to support Fiji with achieving better energy efficiency. Essentially, Fiji has progressed in target 7.B in investments in our energy infrastructure. However, we need to accelerate actions in targets 7.1, 7.2, and 7.3, whereas target 7.8 cannot be measured. Chair, like Fiji, our Pacific Island countries are developing SDG 7 roadmaps to help address our energy challenges. Roadmaps have been completed in Tonga with FSM and Kiribati due to be completed soon, if not already. The development and endorsement of the framework for energy security and resilience in the Pacific 2021 to 2030 is a milestone achievement for us. Alignment in efforts across national and regional implementation is therefore important to ensure long-term improvements in the energy sector in the Pacific. Chair, notwithstanding the ultimate 100% renewable energy vision of the Pacific, the continued heavy reliance on imported fossil fuels for commercial industry-based energy requirements remain a major concern. The average regional renewable energy contribution to total energy produced is low at 17.1%. While the region is among the most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and is still largely driven by carbon-intensive sources of energy, there is an opportunity if the estimated $6 billion spent on fossil fuel imports annually are diverted to the investments in renewable energy and energy efficiency. Reliance on petroleum accounts for about 72% of all electricity generation and essentially 100% for transport energy use, making the Pacific the highest petroleum fuel dependency for any region in the world. Oil price volatility greatly undermines energy security and macroeconomic stabilities in the Pacific. Several Pacific governments have undertaken regular reforms by enacting legislations to empower regulators to improve performance in the provision of energy services. And a few countries have seriously pursued energy efficiency to help mitigate the challenges faced related to climate change and heavy reliance on imported diesel fuel. Finally, Chair, with and through our bilateral, regional, international, and CSO partners, we shall continue to strive for action and progresses our SDG 7 commitments so that we are not left behind. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next, I would like to invite distinguished delegate from UNIDO, and then to be followed by Center for Women's Resource, please.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. This forum is an important platform for us to discuss the challenges and opportunities for sustainable development in Asia-Pacific region and to identify concrete actions to achieve the SDGs by 2030. Among the 17 SDGs, SDGs 7 and 9 are particularly relevant to our commitment and UNIDO's mandates. SDG 7 focuses on access to affordable, reliable, sustainable and modern energy for all, an essential foundation for industrial development. UNIDO is committed to supporting countries in the Asia-Pacific region to achieve this goal through our work on energy efficiency, renewable energy and energy access. In China, for example, we support establishment and development of the International Hydrogen Energy Center, a project that is financed by China and that aims to promote the development of hydrogen energy technologies and applications. Another good example for South-South and triangular cooperation is the Pacific Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, the PCRE, which we established in partnership with the Pacific Community in Tonga in 2017. The center provides technical services to member states and is a hub for bringing the latest technology innovations to the region. Together with UNIDO, the center has established an electric mobility framework for the Pacific, which is currently under implementation. During the upcoming meeting of energy ministers in Vanuatu in May 2023, UNIDO, in partnership with SPC and SIDSTOC, will launch a regional program to promote ocean energy technologies. UNIDO will facilitate SIDSID's cooperation on ocean energy and blue economy issues with other regional sustainable energy centers covering SIDS through a global platform. UNIDO is a gatekeeper of the industry side of SDG 9. It promotes rapid economic and industrial growth, builds trade capacities in industries, and ensures that all countries can benefit from international trade and technological progress through the application of modern industrial policies, compliance with global standards. Moreover, UNIDO aims to advance sustainable growth build institutional capacities for greening industries through cleaner production technologies and resources efficiencies methodologies. We're working with governments, businesses, and other stakeholders to support the development of sustainable and inclusive industries that create decent jobs, promote economic growth, and protect the environment. Two concrete examples. In India, we're promoting energy efficiency and renewable energy in selected micro, small, and medium enterprises clusters. This project aims to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve energy security while supporting competitiveness and sustainability of the MSME sector. In the Philippines, we are working on a renewable energy technology for seaweed value-added project in Tawi-Tawi, which aims to promote sustainable seaweed farming practices and improve the livelihoods of smallholder farmers. I thank you.
Thank you. Next, I would like to invite Center for Women Resource, and to be followed by Buddhist Suchi Foundation, please.
Your Excellency, I'm Kala Piris, representing RPCM. South Asia, which has 860 million women, is home to 1/3 of the world's poor. It is not on track to achieve gender equality by 2030 and will take 71 years to close the gender gap. The COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated all pre-existing challenges and created new impediments to achieving gender equality in the region. Threats to women's human rights, such as debt crisis, unjust trade and investment, austerity measures, lack of public financing for health and education persist, while structural violence against women and girls is pervasive and perpetuated due to social norms, cultural practices, patriarchy, and centuries-old traditions. South Asia has a lower labor force participation, and gender wage gap is wider. Women's labor force participation rate is merely 25% compared to 71.8% among men. Women are overrepresented in the informal sector and do 3 times as much unpaid care and domestic work than men in all South Asian countries. Women also have lower levels of adult literacy than men do. Meanwhile, participation in public life and representation remain low, with only 18.9% of seats in national parliaments held by women. As the economic and social crisis intensifies, violence against women and girls also increases. On the average, 1 in 3 South Asian women experience domestic violence. For us to get on track to achieve gender equality, we need right-based approaches and gender-responsive and equity principles in the design, implementation, and monitoring of SDGs, go beyond the restrictive globally proposed targets and indicators, adopt context-specific indicators, including for sexual and gender-based violence, crime, and violence against women, recognize and act to address unpaid care work burden faced by women and girls, invest in public services, address systemic issues that result women in economic insecurity, reconsider policies that benefit only few and disadvantages the majority of the population, including women in all diversities, provide safety net provisions that will support employability, especially for youth, low-skilled and informal sector. Finally, the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, SAARC, should actively engage with its members on SDGs, share good practices, and forge regional partnerships in fast-tracking Agenda 2030 in the region. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I would like to invite distinguished delegate from Buddhist Suchi Foundation, please.
Good afternoon, Excellencies, fellow civil society and youth representatives. My name is Ashley Young. I am from Malaysia and also youth representative from the Buddhist Suchi Foundation. I'm honored to speak on behalf of the APFSD Youth Forum, representing more than 400 young people across 36 countries in the region. In the APFSD Youth Forum that happened last week, we heard from various UN agencies and youth-led initiatives on the challenges, barriers, and opportunities in achieving the SDGs, and we have established a call to action document. As young people from the Southeast Asian region, one of the most vulnerable sub-regions to the impact of climate change, we are already experiencing severe climate impacts, including rising sea levels, heat waves, flood, and increasingly intense and unpredictable weather events, which has caused huge economic loss and disruption of livelihoods. As a fast-growing sub-region, we are worried about the negative impacts that rapid urbanization and development would bring to the people and the environment, despite the benefit and improvement in certain perspectives, as we are still not practicing sustainability as a core of development. We are confident that young people must be at the heart of investment and part of the conversation in climate ambition as well as COVID-19 recovery. We need not only systemic change, mindset and lifestyle transformation towards sustainability, but also meaningful participation and leadership of young people, women and girls in all diversities, regardless of their identities or abilities throughout decision-making, planning, and implementation processes. We would like to call upon all governments, first, to ensure equitable phase-down of fossil fuels, just transition and scale up of low-carbon energy carriers now. Second, to invest in low-carbon, affordable, and accessible transport infrastructure to support active, shared, and public mobility now. Third, to invest in equitable and sustainable infrastructure that can withstand the climate crisis and natural disasters now. The clock is ticking. We, the young people, are ready to creatively, innovatively, and effectively address all the crises we are facing together with the governments, UN agencies, private sectors, academia, and other stakeholders. We urge you to listen and collaborate with young people and partners now. We must ensure that innovative solutions from young people in response to the SDGs and COVID-19 recovery are amplified at national, regional, and sub-regional levels coherently, and the older generation need to ensure these solutions are heard. Through the intergenerational approach, our effort to achieve the Agenda 2030 would be fast-tracked and impactful. The time to act is now, and the time to work together to change the system and shift the power is now. Thank you.
Thank you. I see there is no more delegation who wish to take the floor. Allow me to close this session and thank you for all contribution and for an excellent segment. Excellency, distinguished delegate, we will now move to agenda item 6, other matter. Before I open the floor for delegation to intervene on the matter, it is my pleasure to report on behalf of the Bureau of Status of Credential of Representative of Member to the 10th Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, in accordance with the Rule 12 of the Rule of Procedure of the Commission. The Bureau of the 10th Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development examined the credential of representatives of 44 member states, submit in accordance with the Rule 11 of the Rule of Procedure of Commission and found them to be in order. The Bureau decided to be defer any action on the credential pertaining to the representative of Myanmar at the 10th Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, pending a decision by General Assembly on the representative of Myanmar and in line with General Assembly Resolution 396V of 14 December 1950, acknowledging the report of Credential Committee of the General Assembly at its 77th session. May I take it that it is the wish of the Forum to take note of the report of the Bureau. I see no objection. It is decided. Is it? Yes. I am asking now the distinguished delegate and other, if any other, matter need to be discussed. Yes, no. I see there is no delegation who wish to take the floor. Allow me to close this session. Many thanks everyone for your valuable contribution throughout the day. We had very productive session. The Secretariat will prepare a report of this meeting for our review by midday tomorrow, Thursday, 30 March. The forum will be resumed tomorrow at 2 p.m. Bangkok time in ESCAP Hall, as well as on Zoom on Consider Agenda Item 7 on review and adoption of the draft report of the forum. I am pleased to note that His Excellency Mr. Mohammed Aslam, Minister of National Planning, Housing and Infrastructure, Maldives, Chair of the forum, will be guide the deliberation. I look forward to your participation tomorrow. Please note that there are a number of events scheduled after this session, as well as tomorrow, in which you may be interested in attending. Please kindly refer to the list of the side events, including the registration details that have been posted on the meeting website. I ask the Secretary of the forum to make housekeeping announcement, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates. There are, as we just heard, a series of side events which will be held after the session, as well as tomorrow morning from 9 a.m. onwards. We'd like to encourage you to participate in these side events. And again, there's more information on the website on how to link and register to these events and where these will be taking place, also on the screen behind me. Second of all, I'd like to wish to remind you to kindly take a few minutes to complete an online evaluation survey. The QR code is being shown on the screen. You could either scan it or by entering the link into a web browser. Having your feedback is important to us so that we can strive to improve future forums and events that we'll be organizing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The meeting is adjourned.